When you close your eyes and picture Italy, what do you see? You likely see the golden light of the Tuscan sun hitting ancient stone. You see the Colosseum, standing as a testament to a fallen empire. You imagine the chaotic romance of a Roman piazza, the smell of espresso, the sharp tailoring of a suit, and the reckless speed of a red sports car blurring down the autostrada. We are conditioned to view Italy through this lens of la dolce vita, the sweet life. It is a country defined by its aesthetics, its passion, and its history. But strip away the postcard romance, and you find a cold, hardened financial reality. Behind the art and the wine lies a rigid industrial skeleton that holds the nation together. And if you trace that skeleton up to the skull, you find a single brain. What if I told you that the true power in Italy does not reside in the Palazzo Chigi, where the Prime Minister sits? What if I told you that one single family, a dynasty often whispered about as the uncrowned kings of Italy, has exerted more influence over the country's GDP, its culture, and its foreign policy than any elected coalition in the last century? They are the reason you drive the car you drive. They are the ink in the newspapers you read to understand the world. They are the adrenaline in the soccer team that half the nation worships. Yet their name is rarely on the front door. They operate in the shadows of their own brands. Today, we are stripping back the velvet curtain on the Agnelli family and the massive, labyrinthine shadow empire known as Exor. For over 120 years, this family has navigated 2 world wars, the rise and fall of fascism, devastating economic collapses, and domestic terrorism. While other European dynasties, the Krupps, the Romanovs, faded into history or ruin, the Agnellis evolved. They transformed from a simple car manufacturer into a global puppet master. They built a diversified holding company that manages over $30 billion in net asset value, controlling a web of companies worth hundreds of billions more. But this isn't just a story about wealth. Wealth is common. This is a masterclass in industrial survival and the accumulation of soft power. To understand how they control Italy today and how they have positioned themselves to control the future of global luxury and technology, we have to look at the blueprint they drew in 1899. To understand the Agnelli Empire, you must first understand the city of Turin at the turn of the 20th century. While Rome was the heart of the church and Florence was the heart of art, Turin was the engine room. It was closer to Paris and Berlin than it was to Naples, both geographically and spiritually. It was cold, industrious, and aristocratic. In 1899, a group of investors gathered at the Palazzo Bricciaraccio to sign the charter for a new venture, Fabbrica Italiana Automobili Torino. Fiat among them was a former cavalry officer named Giovanni Agnelli. He was not the only founder, but he was, by far, the most ruthless. Within a few years, through sheer force of will and strategic maneuvering, Agnelli pushed the other partners out. He understood something the others didn't. The automobile wasn't just a toy for the rich. It was the future of logistics, war, and society. Giovanni Agnelli didn't just build a factory, he built a state within a state. During the First World War, Fiat didn't just make cars, they made machine guns, aircraft engines, and trucks. The war made the Agnellis fabulously wealthy, cementing a rule that would guide the family for a century: always be essential to the government. If the government needs you to survive, the government will ensure you survive. By the mid-20th century, the equation was simple. If you lived in Italy, you worked for Fiat, or you bought from someone who did. At its absolute peak, this single company accounted for nearly 5% of Italy's total GDP. To put that in perspective, imagine if Apple, Google, and Amazon were all one company, and that company also built the tanks for the military and owned the biggest newspaper. That was Fiat. They called it the economic miracle. Post-war Italy was in ruins, and Fiat provided the mobility that got the country moving again. The Fiat 500 wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of liberation for the Italian working class. It was the first time a factory worker could afford to drive his family to the coast for a holiday. The Agnellis became the architects of the Italian middle class. But heavy is the head that wears the crown. Being the engine of a country is a dangerous position. When the engine stalls, the country crashes. In the 1970s, Italy entered a period known as the Years of Lade. It was a decade of domestic terrorism, kidnappings, and political assassinations. The Red Brigades, a far-left militant group, targeted factory owners and executives. Wealthy families fled the country, moving their capital to Switzerland or London, but the Agnellis stayed. This era was defined by Gianni Agnelli, the grandson of the founder, known affectionately and respectfully as El Avvocato, the lawyer. Gianni was the embodiment of Italian style. He wore his watch over his shirt cuff, a quirk that men all over Europe copied. He charmed the Kennedys, partied with the jet set, and ran the company with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. Gianni understood that for the dynasty to survive, they had to be more than just rich. They had to be symbols of the nation itself. He navigated the labor strikes and the terrorism not by hiding, but by being omnipresent. However, behind the glamour, the family recognized a terrifying truth. They were too exposed. The Agnellis knew a fundamental rule of finance that many tycoons ignore until it is too late. Dependency is a risk. If the Italian car market crashed, the family died. If the Italian government turned against them, they had no leverage. They were metal and tires, rich, which is heavy, illiquid, and vulnerable. So they began a century-long process of financial camouflage. They began to shift from being industrialists to being allocators of capital. Here is the secret truth that explains their modern dominance. The Agnellis aren't car people anymore, they are asset managers. This transition culminated in the creation of Exor. Exor is the holding company, the brain that sits above the body. Through Exor, the family moved their capital out of the dirty, low-margin business of manufacturing and into the high-margin world of influence and brand equity. Let's look at the portfolio. It is a masterclass in diversification. First, there is Stellantis. The Agnellis realized that Fiat, on its own, could not survive the globalized 21st century. It was too small to compete with Toyota or Volkswagen. So, under the leadership of their brilliant CEO Sergio Marchionne, they orchestrated the acquisition of Chrysler, and later, the merger with Peugeot to form Stellantis. Today, the Agnellis are the largest shareholders in this massive conglomerate that owns Jeep, Ram, Dodge, Maserati, Alfa Romeo, and Citroën. They traded total control of a small Italian car company for significant influence over a global automotive giant. They diluted their ownership to increase their survival rate. Then there is the crown jewel, Ferrari. For decades, Ferrari was just a racing division of Fiat. It was a money pit, kept alive for passion and prestige. But the family realized that Ferrari wasn't a car company, it was a luxury goods company. It had more in common with Hermes or Rolex than it did with Ford. In a stroke of financial genius, they spun Ferrari off as a separate public company. The market valuations skyrocketed. Today, Ferrari is worth more than many mass-market car manufacturers combined, despite selling a fraction of the units. This spin-off unlocked billions of dollars in value for the Agnelli family, capital that could be deployed elsewhere. But to control a country, you need more than money. You need the narrative. This brings us to the information economy. Through Exor, the family owns a controlling stake in GEDI Gruppo Editoriale. This gives them control over La Repubblica and La Stampa Asterisk, two of Italy's most influential newspapers, but their reach goes beyond Italy. They are the largest shareholders in The Economist Asterisk, the Bible of the global financial elite. Why does a family interested in cars and football buy a British weekly magazine? Because it buys them a seat at the table. When you own The Economist Asterisk, you control the intellectual current of global business. You frame the debate. By controlling the news in Italy and the analysis in London, the Agnellis ensure that the narrative always tilts in their favor. This is how you control a country's direction without ever holding public office. You don't tell people what to think, you tell them what to think asterisk about. However, the most brilliant piece of the Agnelli puzzle isn't a car or a newspaper. It's a soccer team. Why does a sophisticated financial dynasty own Juventus F.C? From a purely financial standpoint, soccer teams are terrible investments. They burn cash, the assets, players depreciate or get injured, and revenue is volatile. But the Agnellis don't hold Juventus for the dividends. They hold it for social capital. Juventus is the most successful club in Italian history. In Italy, soccer is not a sport, it is a religion. It is the Sunday Mass. By owning Juventus, the Agnellis position themselves as the stewards of the national pastime. They have a direct line to the hearts of the public, and more importantly, the voters. This creates a human shield around their business interests. When the government considers regulations that might hurt Agnelli factories or tax structures, they aren't just fighting a cold, faceless corporation. They are fighting the owners of the nation's pride. They are fighting the people who sign the checks for the country's heroes. By being the custodians of Juventus, the family makes themselves too big to fail and too loved to tax. It is the modern equivalent of the Roman bread and circuses. Give the people a winning team, and they will forgive your offshore tax havens. And speaking of offshore, this brings us to the modern era and the man who sits on the throne today, John Elkann. Gianni Agnelli, the stylish patriarch, passed away in 2003. He left a power vacuum. The designated heir had died young of cancer, and the family was in turmoil. Into this chaos stepped John Elkann, Gianni's grandson. He was young, shy, and seemingly out of his depth. The wolves of Wall Street and the sharks of Italian politics circled, waiting for the empire to crumble. But John Elkann possessed a cold, analytical brilliance that his grandfather lacked. Gianni was a king, John is an engineer of finance. Under Elkann's watch, the family made their most controversial and profitable move yet. They moved the legal headquarters of their empire away from Turin. They moved it to the Netherlands. Why the Netherlands? It wasn't for the weather. It was for the loyalty shares. Dutch corporate law allows for a structure where long-term shareholders get double voting rights. This allowed the Agnelli family to tighten their grip on Exor while owning less of the actual equity. It was a masterstroke of governance. But it was also a betrayal. The family that had been the symbol of Italy, the family that had been synonymous with the Italian flag, had packed up their legal bags and moved to Amsterdam for tax efficiency and control. It sparked outrage in the Italian parliament, but there was nothing the government could do. The Agnellis had become a supranational entity. They had outgrown the country that birthed them. Under Elkann, Exor is pivoting again. They are looking at the next 100 years. They know that the internal combustion engine has an expiration date. They know that newspapers are dying. So, where is the money going? Healthcare and technology. Exor recently invested nearly $1 billion into the healthcare sector, acquiring significant stakes in companies like Institut Maria. They are betting on the longevity economy. If the 20th century was about mobility, the 21st century is about living longer. They are also doubling down on true luxury. They took a 24% stake in Christian Louboutin, the iconic French shoe designer. Why? Because the rich are getting richer. The gap between the wealthy and the working class is widening globally. Selling mass-market cars is a race to the bottom on price. Selling red-bottomed shoes is a high-margin game where price is irrelevant. This is the genius of the Agnelli evolution. They are constantly moving up the value chain. They went from selling basic transportation to the masses to selling exclusivity to the elite. While the world watches Italian politics change hands every few years, technocrats replacing populists, coalitions forming and collapsing within months, the Agnellis remain. They are the constant in a sea of variables. Prime ministers come and go, begging for votes. The Agnellis do not need to win elections when they own the infrastructure the candidates drive on, the media that covers the campaigns, and the medical technology that keeps the voters alive. The Agnelli family is the perfect example of how old-world industrial wealth can hide in plain sight by evolving into a modern financial powerhouse. They teach us that true wealth is not about hoarding cash. It is about hoarding optionality. It is about never being dependent on a single market, a single government, or a single product. They survived the transition from horses to cars. They survived the transition from fascism to democracy. Now, they are navigating the transition from the industrial age to the digital age. But as we marvel at this machinery of wealth, we must ask ourselves, What is the cost of such concentrated power? When a single family holds the keys to the cultural and economic engines of a G7 nation, is it truly a democracy, or is it a benevolent corporate monarchy? The Agnellis are not the only ones playing this game. We see the same patterns repeating across the globe. There are families in every major economy playing the same hidden game, operating behind the shield of holding companies and charitable trusts. They are the architects of the world we live in, yet we rarely know their names until we start digging. So where should we dig next? Should we look north to the icy waters of Sweden, where the Wallenberg family controls a staggering percentage of the entire Swedish stock market, influencing everything from telecommunications to defense? Or should we look west to Canada, where the Desmarais family has built a transatlantic power base that intertwines with the highest levels of French and Canadian politics? The world is full of these invisible empires, and here at Wealth Chronicles, we are dedicated to mapping them out, one dynasty at a time. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the intersection of history, psychology, and finance, make sure to hit the like button. It helps us get these stories in front of more people who want to understand how the world really works. And subscribe, because next week, we are opening the file on a family that makes the Agnellis look like amateurs. This is Wealth Chronicles. Stay curious, stay ambitious, and always look for the name behind the name.